If you want to upgrade your JavaScript applications, then you need to understand operators. From mathematical to comparison to logical operators, operators are used in every single web application. So in today's video, we're going to take a look at JavaScript operators. So there are three main types of JavaScript operators. We have mathematical, comparison, and logical operators. And we're going to take a look at mathematical and comparison operators, but logical operators are a bit out of the scope for this video, so I'm going to save those for their own separate video in the future. So let's get started working with mathematical and comparison operators. But before we do that, we're going to take a look at one more operator type, and this is going to be the assignment operator. Now, if you see my JavaScript variables tutorial linked up in the cards if you want to go and check it out, you've already seen the assignment operator. So the assignment operator is just going to assign values to certain things. So whenever we create a variable, we are assigning a value to that variable. So when we say let num equal 52, this equal sign right here is the assignment operator. And whenever we do the reassignment, so we say num is now equal to 25, this equal sign is also the assignment operator. So anytime you're setting something equal to something, you're using the assignment operator. But now that we've got that out of the way, let's take a look at our very first new type of operators, the mathematical operators. Now, the mathematical operators are exactly as they sound, and they allow you to do basic mathematical operations. Now, before you start freaking out, this is not about math or anything crazy like that. This is just basic adding and subtracting, multiplying and dividing, and JavaScript is going to do the work for you, don't you worry. So whenever we do a mathematical operation, JavaScript is actually going to evaluate it for us. So let's log out to the console, a basic mathematical operation. So let's say console.log, and then let's just say 8 plus 3, and we'll save. Now we're going to open up our console, and you can see that it's output 11. Now, why did it output 11 as the answer rather than the 8 plus 3 that we put in there? Well, the reason is because JavaScript is going to evaluate it before it passes it in to the console.log. So anytime JavaScript sees a operation, whether it be mathematical, logical, whatever, it's going to evaluate that operation before it does anything else. And we can actually do this with variables as well. So if we wanted to create a variable that contained a mathematical operation, we could do that as well. So we could say let op equal 9 plus 14, and then we could log out the variable op, and if we save that, you can see we got the answer 23 output to the console. So whenever we do this, it's going to evaluate it and save that evaluated value in that op variable. And we also have other mathematical operations we can do as well. So we can subtract, and this is going to give us a -5, and you notice that it actually puts the negative in front of the 5 to indicate that it is a negative number. And we can actually do multiplication as well by using the star, and if we save that, it's going to output that value of 126, which must be the answer apparently, to the console. And we can also do a division with the /, and if we save that, it's going to output the answer as well. So let's take a look at something a little bit differently now. Let's get rid of this whole thing here, and we're going to replace it with a string. So I'm going to say hello, and then I'm going to say a plus, and then I'm going to say world. Now, what in the world do you think is going to happen whenever we save this here? Well, whenever we save it, we're going to get the joined version of hello and world, those two strings. It's going to do what's called concatenate. It's going to concatenate those two strings together into a single string. And this is what happens when you use an addition operator on two or more strings. It's going to concatenate those together. And string concatenation is something for a different video. I just wanted to show you could do this here because we're talking about operations already. But this is a very basic concept that allows you to join multiple strings into one single string, and is used all over the place. Maybe not this, but concatenation in general is used all over the place. So now that we have a good understanding of the mathematical operators, let's take a look at our next one, which is going to be comparison operators. Now, comparison operators are one of the most useful types of operators, and they're used in just about every JavaScript application. And what they do is they compare different values and they evaluate to either a true or a false, and it will tell you whether the operation evaluates to true or false. And one of the first types of comparison operators are the greater than and less than operators. These will tell you if a value is greater than another value or less than another value, just like in regular mathematics. Now we can use the comparison operators here, and we can compare two different values. So let's say we want to compare if 89 is greater than 92. And if we save that, you're going to see over here in the console, we get a Boolean value of false because 89 is actually less than 92. But if we swap this around here and say 89 is less than 92 and we save that, now we get a true Boolean value back. And these are generally combined with things like conditionals, which we'll get to in another video, but generally we will put this inside of conditional to check whether something is true or whether it is false. And there are many different ways that we might have to use these comparisons. So what about something like this? Is 89 less than 89? Is it going to evaluate to true or is it going to evaluate to false? Well, if we save it, you're actually going to see that it's going to evaluate to false. And the reason for that is because 89 is not less than or greater than 89. 89 is actually equal to 89. So we actually have another operator that we can use for this situation. We can say, is 89 less than or equal to 89? And now if we save it, it's going to evaluate to true because we're asking, is it less than or equal to? It's not less than, but it is equal to 89. So it's going to evaluate to true that it is in fact equal to 89. In the same way with the greater than or equal to sign, we can ask, is 89 greater than or equal to 89? And of course, greater than is false, but it is equal to it. So this is going to evaluate to true because one of the two were actually true. But now if we try to make this comparison to something a little different, maybe we're asking, is 89 greater than or equal to 92? And this is going to evaluate to false because neither 89 is not greater than nor is it equal to 92. But if we go back and we change this to a less than or equal to, this again is going to evaluate to true because 89 is less than 92, but it's not equal to it. But it's still going to evaluate to true because one of those two were true. So now that we know we can check to see if something is greater than or less than, how do we check for strict equality just to see if something is equal to something else? We can check equality just by using a double equal sign, and this is what's called loose equality checking. And we'll get to strict equality checking in just a second, and I'll get into the differences here in a minute. But this is how we can check to see if something is equal to something else. And if I save this, you're going to see, of course, it is false because 92 is not equal to 89. But if we say 89 is equal to 89, we can now see that it is true. Now, what if we have something like this, where we have the string 89 being compared to the number 89? Is it going to be true because they're both 89? Or is it going to be false because they're completely different types and you shouldn't even be comparing different types? Well, let's save it and check it out. So if we save, we can see that it's actually going to evaluate to true. And the reason for this is because it is parsing the string 89 back to a number and then comparing it that way. This is why this is called loose equality, because it does not check the types, it just checks the values. So if we have a string of 89 and we loosely check the equality of it to a number 89, it's going to return true. And this is why we have the strict equality checking, which is defined with the triple equals sign. Now, whenever you compare using strict equality, it checks the type as well. So now you can see that it's actually going to turn false. And the reason for that is because it's no longer parsing the value into the number, it's actually checking to see if they're even the same type. And this is why it's generally a good idea to always use the triple equals sign, which is strict equality checking, rather than the double equals sign, because it will also check the types and make sure that it is truly equal to that value, rather than this kind of edge case, I should say, where it's only checking the value and not the type. Now that we know how to check for equality, we can also check for inequality, and just like the equality, we have loose and we have strict inequality as well. So if we want to check for inequality, we would use the exclamation point and an equal sign, and this is going to be the loose inequality. And if we save this, it's going to evaluate to false. And the reason for that is because we're checking to see if the string 89 is not equal to the number 89. And if you remember, it was loosely equal to 89, so this is going to evaluate to false because we're checking if it's not equal. Now we can also check for strict inequality, and if we save that, it's going to evaluate to true. And that's because we are strictly checking both the number and the type, and we can see that the type is different, so it is true that it is not equal to 89. So now that we know mathematical and comparison operators, let's take a look at some of the shorthand assignment operators. These are nice little operators that allow you to combine a mathematical and an assignment operators both together. So to use the shorthand assignment operators, let's say we have a situation like this where we have num equal to 52 and we're logging out num. But before we log out num, we want to add 15 to num. So we could always do something like this where we say num is equal to num plus 15, and it's going to give us the exact result that we're looking for. It's going to add 15 to num and then save the value back into num. But there's a slightly shorter way that we could do this. We could say num plus equals 15, and this is the shorthand assignment operator, and it's going to give us the exact same result. It's just a little bit of a shorter way to get the exact same result. And we can also do this with subtracting as well. We could say num minus equals 15, and it's going to subtract 15 from num and then save it back into num. Same with multiplying, it's going to do the exact same thing, and same with dividing. It's just a slightly shorter way of doing it. Now there's a couple more operators like the increment and decrement operators, which we can go ahead and just use right here. Let's say we want to add 1 or subtract 1 from num. We could just say num plus plus, and that's going to add a single 1 to num. This is generally used for things like loops where you always want to increment by 1 or decrement by 1. We could also decrement by using minus minus, and it's going to subtract 1 from that value. Now another one that we can take a look at is the exponentiation operator. So let's say num is equal to 2, and we want to save the value of 2 to the third power back into num. So we could say num is equal to num times 3, and this is what this is saying is that num to the power of 3, so 2 to the power of 3 is going to give us a result of 8, and the shorthand for this is just times equals, just like this, and it's going to give us the same exact result. Now there's one more that I want to take a look at, and this is one that many non-programmers have really never heard of. So let's go back to our example of 52, and let's get rid of this. Now this next one is actually going to be the modulo operator, and what it does is it's going to divide, and instead of giving you the answer, it's going to give you the remainder. So we're going to say num is equal to num, and then modulo operator is the percent sign, and then we're going to say, let's say modulo 2. So it's going to divide 52 by 2, and it's going to give you the remainder. So if we save, we should get 0, meaning there's no remainder left over. If we did a 3, it's going to give us a 1 as a remainder, because if you divide 52 by 3, you're going to get 17.3 as a remainder. So it's giving us that remainder. And this is how we get things like whether something is even or something is odd, because if we divide something by 2 and it gives us 0, that means that it's even. But if we divide by 2 and it gives us a 1, that means it's an odd number. This is the main focal point of this, but it can be used for a lot of other different things. And just for reference, there is a shorthand for this as well. Just like all the other shorthands, we can do modulo equals, and it still gives us the exact same result stored back into num. And that is it for JavaScript operators. Now, I know this video was packed very full with information, so if you didn't understand anything, drop a comment down below. I'll answer as many questions as you have. If you did like the video, make sure you slap a like on it. Check out the full playlist, link is right next to me. Make sure you subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.